Few gaming franchises are as consistently scary or as consistently good as Resident Evil. The rise of VR has only added to the series' immersion and, as a result, the horror. While some entries are more frightening than others, with the Resident Evil franchise being one of the most terrifying is certainly saying something. So find a hand to hold or a pillow to hide behind, because today on Game Rant, we're going to be highlighting some of the scariest games in the Resident Evil series. First up is the Resident Evil 4 remake. Some consider Resident Evil 4 a perfect game and thus question the necessity for a remake. However, the reimagining does do a lot to justify its existence with subtle gameplay tweaks and dramatic visual upgrades. Even though players have more tools up their sleeves, the game manages to be more difficult and, as a result, scarier than the original. Part of what adds to the fear is how old tricks no longer work. The knife is now breakable and resources are finite. So watch out, folks, because you've been warned. Next up is Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village strikes a bizarre balance where it's fascinating to roam around, but it's also terrifying at the same time. You don't really want to know what's behind the next corner, but you also have to know. The sense of exploration is strong, but so too are the scares. With the release of PSVR 2, players now have a new way to experience the game in a manner similar to Resident Evil 7's VR mode. The game's bigger scale and more action-packed moments make it feel like a whole new experience, even to those well acquainted with the game. Not to mention, the method of managing inventory and having to manually reload weapons makes the game both harder and scarier in this mode. Then we have the Resident Evil remake. The Resident Evil remake came out only 6 years after the original, but the game's director Shinji Mikami saw an opportunity to do things that he couldn't with the original due to technical limitations. In a way, it feels like a director's cut akin to Superman 2 or even Blade Runner. The HD re-releases help the visual shine, as well as preserves the classic and makes it more accessible for modern gamers. One of the scariest additions to the remake is the character of Lisa Trevor. Now, we're not going to spoil anything here specifically, but just be warned that her encounter is deeply unsettling and the story, it's simply tragic.
Stay back, sir, I got this.
Yet another reimagining lands on our list with the Resident Evil 2 remake. The Resident Evil 2 remake was desired by fans for years before it was announced, and yet the finished project still somehow managed to surpass expectations, delivering everything fans wanted from it and more. It mixes the more action-leaning gameplay of Resident Evil 4 with the fright and tension of the original games, making the timeless classic feel like a whole new experience. The most notable part of the campaign is Mr. X, who relentlessly chases Leon and Claire through the police station, being wildly unpredictable at times. And of course, the visual fidelity of the RE engine significantly lends to the terror.
Where do you think you're going?
And lastly, we have arguably the scariest game in the series, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. After the bombastic action of Resident Evil 6, the series went back to its roots with a smaller, more intimate setting in Resident Evil 7. Notably, it also shifted the franchise into the first-person perspective. By introducing a new protagonist, the game puts players directly in the shoes of an inexperienced everyman thrown into a waking nightmare. Being hunted by the Baker family is an unforgettably scary experience, and that terror is heightened tenfold by those brave enough to play it in VR. Though the visual fidelity does decrease when playing in PSVR, it is a worthy trade-off to be fully immersed in the world. However, you do have to be willing to put on the headset first. And that does it for our look at the scariest games in the Resident Evil franchise. For even more great gaming content, make sure to stay tuned to Game Rant.